right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Black History Month Kickoff celebration. I'm excited to be with you all in community this evening to celebrate Black History Month during this event. My name is Javon Edwards. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm an admissions officer and graduate student here at Cal Poly. And I'm also currently supporting the Black Academic Excellence Center this quarter. And it's my pleasure to serve as your MC this evening. It's truly intended to be a kickoff celebration, and I hope to see some virtual clapping, some emojis thrown out there, and conversations in the chat. So before we begin, I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. As a public institution, we acknowledge that the land on which Cal Poly sits carries the heritage and culture of the indigenous people of San Luis Obispo County, the Yaqui Chushu Yaktailini Northern Chumash tribe. We do have the responsibility to acknowledge their presence and educate the community as a whole about their history. We do honor the indigenous people's connection to these territories and respect the land on which we are on today as uninvited guests. So, Black History Month is about celebrating the contributions of the Black community in this country. It is about remembering our history, our struggles, our achievements, to understand the privileges we have gained from our ancestors that gave their blood, sweat, tears, and bodies so that we could have Black humanity, equality, and opportunities available to us today. In reality, Black history belongs to all of us because it's in our nation's history. It is engraved in our collective consciousness. Black history tells the story of this nation. When President Gerald R. Ford expanded the Negro History Week in a full month in 1976, he said the country needed to seize the opportunity to honor the too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout our history. I challenge us to expand the celebration of Black history to not only a month, but to 365 days a year. After the month of February is over, we should continue to increase our understandings and education of Black history to remind our nation, not just how far we have come, but how much further there is to go. Thank you all again for being here this evening. I would like to now quickly share some links in the chat to our Black History Month calendar and newsletter. The Black Academic Excellence Center, along with the campus community, have organized some awesome programming this month in recognition of Black History Month. And so those links will be provide you with all the information you need of what's in store for this month. So now let's get this kickoff started. First up, we have Edmond McGinley. Edmond is a third-year music major whose interest extends from songwriting to audio engineering. Being raised by a single mom in his hometown of Bakersfield, he has focused on creating an environment in which he can be himself through music. He is a self-proclaimed autodidact, which, if you didn't know, because I didn't, is a self-taught or self-educated person. His music style can be described as sophisticated yet catchy, with a sound that blends crossover jazz, soulful 70s style R&B, and pop with contemporary electronic production techniques. Over the past summer, he picked up a hobby of writing poems, and in doing so, he intends to mold both worlds of poetry and sound into a unique experience. Please give a warm virtual welcome to Edmond McGinley, who's going to recite a poem and perform a musical piece that he has created.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Javon, for that introduction. When thinking about what I wanted to share for this event, I began to write all these little glimpses from my youth that reminded me of my mom. And that reminded me of how strong she was, a West African woman, and the perseverance that she had to go through to raise me as a single Black mom, and to raise me from being a boy into a strong Black man. And the title of this poem that I wrote is called Black Youth. And I would like everyone at this time, if you like, to imagine the images of your youth. Close your eyes and visualize a favorite pastime or the time you spent with your loved ones, our heritage as a culture, our strength. I want you to take this time to relax and enjoy the Black youth. a soft smile playing outside, soul music, soul food, generosity, the street light, the embracing hug, Sunday church, our ancestors' strength. Their love travels beyond time. Black is beautiful and bountiful. We don't stop till we get enough. I am the twinkle in the sky, unique as ever before. I am strong and rooted. Nothing can stop me. My culture, my heritage, I adore and cherish. I can and will achieve my goal, soaring far, far beyond the galaxy. In the peace and in the stillness, my Black youth.
And now Edmond will transition to a musical piece that he wrote titled The Dream Lives On.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Edmond, for reciting your beautifully written poem and performing your piano piece. They both were lovely. Awesome. So our next student performer is Ashleigh Austin. Ashleigh was born in Hanford, California, and is a third-year psychology student minoring in child development, and is a member of Cal Poly's Black Student Union. Ashleigh transferred from Cuesta College with Associates of Arts degree in psychology and Associates of Arts degree in early childhood education. She loves working with kids, creating art, and singing. Ashleigh recently showcased her talents in a beautiful rendition of Nina Simone's Black Bird for Cal Poly's 2020 Culture Fest. And I'm actually going to provide the link below because the music video is truly breathtaking. So enjoy that as well. Ashleigh hopes to receive her marriage and family therapist license after graduating Cal Poly and eventually wants to transition into becoming a high school counselor. Please give a warm virtual welcome to Ashleigh Austin.
Hello. Hi, so my name is Ashleigh, and when I was asked to do this performance, I wasn't actually sure what I was going to perform. So many different songs like popped in my head, but I ended up choosing Masterpiece by Jasmine Sullivan. Through so much of this social unrest, I found myself angry and frustrated and sad, but most of all, and every single day, I felt grateful. I felt like I am so lucky to live and I love my life. So through Jasmine Sullivan's song about loving yourself and seeing the beauty in you and what makes you, I chose to put a video together that kind of includes all the mediums of my life. So that includes my family and friends and animals. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you guys can see it and hopefully you guys enjoy. My eyes ain't used to these rays. I'm feeling exposed, but I can't hide no more, can I? As the sun shines on all of my glory, my flaws don't look so bad at all. What was I so afraid of? Every part of me is a vision of a portrait of Mona Lisa. Every part of me is beautiful, and I finally see I'm a work of art, I'm a masterpiece. Who is this I tried so long to find? Filling my head with lies that I'm not good enough. Then I heard something in my ear tell me I'm perfect. Now that I know the truth, it's time to show and prove. Every part of me is a vision of a portrait of Mona Lisa. Every part of me is beautiful, and I finally see I'm a work of art, I'm a masterpiece. Now I see the pretty colors on my canvas. I'm a work of art, I'm Mona Lisa. I'll share my picture with the world, not afraid to let it shine anymore. Share my picture with the world. I'm beautiful. I'm beautiful. You are beautiful.
so are you.
Yes, y'all better give it up. I better see some snaps or something. Thank you, Ashleigh.
I'm unmuting for that.
Yes.
Yeah, that was amazing. Awesome.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ashleigh. All right. Next up, we have Dr. Thanayi Jackson. Dr. Jackson is a U.S. historian and assistant professor of history at Cal Poly in the College of Liberal Arts. She earned her PhD at the University of Maryland, College Park, and her research examines politics and race in the U.S. from 1865, Civil War and Reconstruction, African American activism, and partisanship and political culture. She abides by a punk rock pedagogy whereby anything can be learned, everything can be deconstructed, and nothing can be lost. Please give a warm virtual welcome to Dr. Thanayi Jackson.
Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. This is my second year at Cal Poly, and I'm sort of interrupted by the pandemic and getting to know everybody and really getting my feel of campus. So I feel blessed by events like this, right? It's my chance to kind of still get out there and get to know everybody. Again, punk rock pedagogy. If you need to jump in, I was saying before we started this thing, if you want to hold the floor, you have to hold the floor. So I'm all for jumping in. I'm all for talking over me in the chat. That's totally how I roll. I'm going to say some things today a little bit. When I first got asked to do this, I don't remember if it was the end of December or the first week in January. And I thought, yeah, of course. And I knew exactly what I was going to talk about. Can we take a moment to bask in the glory that is Stacey Abrams? That was where I was going. Still am. Seriously, I want to take a moment and bask in the glory that is Stacey Abrams. And I want to be specific about why I want to celebrate her. She's one of the greatest political minds of our era. There's no question about it. This is not about like an emotional pride, symbolic response to how proud I am to see a Black woman take this kind of intellectual power. This is actually a celebration of one of the greatest political minds of our era. As a person whose job it is to cultivate what I call memory language, that's exactly the phrase I want to use. I mean, I want to be clear. Did she manifest the ancestors into a genealogy of knowledge that gave her an inside read into her state and her countrymen? Absolutely. Did she hit the street and put in the footwork necessary to mobilize? I saw it too. Is she brave as hell, refusing to concede after the governorship was stolen from her right before our eyes? Child, please, I saw it. But this ain't that part. It's another thing. Make no mistake. What happened in Georgia was not luck, and it was not merely anti-Trump pushback. This is a sophisticated strategic dismantling of voter suppression that's been years in the making. And as a student of American political thought, Stacey Abrams just took her seat at the head of the table. The coalition building, the policy watching, the money raising, the control of the narrative, the legal acumen, it's a masterclass in political intellect. And we better remember it that way. I want to talk about what she did, right? She strategically set out to expand democracy by dismantling voter suppression with the weapon of transparency. And she thereby changed the balance of power in Georgia and maybe the South and maybe every predominantly Black urban district in the country. She nullified her opponent's political strategy. The strategy was voter suppression. After technically winning the governorship in a historic race, she mobilized her new power. By not conceding Georgia, she maintained legal standing, which gave her position to force litigation and shine a light on this stuff. Having seen her viability, the Democratic Party and the international press gave her space to operate. She was a major player. While iron was hot, she directed her campaign towards dismantling the 100-plus-year-old system of Jim Crow voter suppression. It had strategically and blatantly purged and erased votes and had just robbed them of their work by stealing the governorship using voter suppression. The Abrams campaign had just witnessed it from the inside, a vantage point that allowed them to identify the inner workings of the suppression system and compile evidence, shining that light. She built on the genealogy of Southern thought. The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. Ida B. Wells. While some folks are out here mocking the press, talking fake news and all sorts of conspiracy theories, Abrams implemented the press as the fourth estate, its rightful place. And by doing so, she armed her movement with actual evidence, this stuff the other side doesn't have. Actual evidence of voter suppression, documenting Jim Crow voter suppression like that perpetrated against 92-year-old Christine Jordan, who was filmed getting turned away from an electoral site, a polling place, for no apparent reason. And this happened again and again and again. And because she'd activated the press, she had receipt after receipt after receipt. Anyone who tried to come at her after that got what was coming, a lawsuit. She went Oprah. You get a lawsuit, you get a lawsuit, you get a lawsuit, and definitely you get a lawsuit. That's the way it works. It's no coincidence that she built this movement with real news and documented cases of real perpetrators of voter suppression. That's the genius part. That they would be charged with voter fraud if they won was never in doubt. Challenging Black votes is as old as Black voting. In 1867, the first Black voter registrars were challenged to no avail in an attempt to end Black voting on the spot. In the first elections after the Reconstruction Acts, in which Black men could participate, the opposing white party cried foul. First, they challenged the legitimacy of the registrations, and when that didn't work, they created the Klan. This is not new. The South was Black. Wherever there had been a large plantation, now there was a Black electoral majority. One party ran on trying to get Black votes, the other vowed to repeal Black voting. In democracy, in the wake of plantation slavery, the Black electorate could not be beat. Plantations were now voting districts. That they would come with charges of voter fraud was never in question, but not this time, because Stacey Abrams was standing there with receipts in front of one of the most transparent elections that the state had ever seen. And by transparent, I really do mean that Stacey Abrams is standing there with the receipts of over 200,000 Black voters who were illegally purged from the rolls in 2019. So what's your move? You gonna call the cops on yourself? The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. It's harder to cheat with that light of truth on you. And Abrams has it break out there. I swear, if you even dream of purging a vote, you're gonna wake up to a text from Stacey Abrams, followed by a visit from the ACLU. But I've watched commentary for 2 years that kind of look at what's happening in Georgia with a head pat and an atta girl. But then you start hearing people talking about the significance of this thing. Is it a new, even more new South? And that got me thinking about the language we use to tell our story. When the history of this political movement is written, be sure to write of the feet on the street, the bravery, the magic, but we best remember to frame Stacey Abrams as an intellectual thinker behind the new, even more new South. I'm basking in it. Now, I was going to stop there and keep going with my ode to Stacey when I talked to you all today. Yeah, that was going to be my whole bit. Then January 6th happened. And I had to bear witness to what it is I witnessed. History feels so different when you're living it. You know, I study race and partisanship and politics all the time. It feels different when you're standing inside of it. But boy, do you know it when you see it. I recognized what I saw immediately, an attempted lynching in Chocolate City. When I set that on top of the grid of what I already intended to say about Stacey Abrams, a celebration of Black excellence, I recognized what I saw immediately, an attempted coup. And like all American coups, it was based on a call of Black illegitimacy. Black votes must be recounted. Black voters must be policed. Recount. Recount in Philadelphia. Recount in Atlanta. Recount in Milwaukee. Recount in Detroit. It's no surprise that the calls for recount were called upon in all predominantly Black cities, Detroit, 82% Black. Milwaukee's largest racial demographic, Black, 37%. Philadelphia, 44%. Atlanta, 54%. The only recognized coup in US history is Wilmington, 1898. I was so blown away by it when I first heard about it. My first thought was, huh? How in the world had Black folks been so powerful in 1898 that it took a coup to overthrow them? Yeah, marinate on that for a minute, for real. How were Black folks so powerful in 1898 that it took a violent coup to overthrow them? I became obsessed with it. I became obsessed with this notion of post-emancipation Black power. I was so taken with it that I wrote my dissertation on Reconstruction Wilmington. I was like, I have to know what was going on before this coup. And I've been asked about Wilmington quite a bit since January 6th. Now, historians know that the only thing that stays the same is change. In fact, I was surprised by 1898 because I had bought into a flat history in which Black folks are always oppressed by the same old oppression in the same exact way. It's ridiculous almost. It's ahistorical thought, and ahistorical thought will con you every time. Everything changes over time. Oppression, freedom, Blackness. In November 1898, newspapers reported a massacre that ran the Cape Fear River red with blood. It was a conflation of causes, but only one mattered. Wilmington had a biracial Black city government from the moment Black men could vote in 1868. That very year, the Klan formed and tried to prevent Black voting with force, but Wilmington was a majority Black city, and Black Wilmingtonians chased off the Klan with weapons they'd been secretly stockpiling since slavery. In 1870, the city council was majority Black. After the Klan was able to stave off voting in other parts of the state, taking control of the state legislature happened automatically. It was the same new story, gerrymandering and voter suppression. But it still didn't take Wilmington. In the 1880s, a third fusion party united working class whites and Blacks. And in the 1890s, there were still Black men on the city council. The outrage manufactured in 1898 was not over policy, and it wasn't rational. If you think these folks are nonsensical now, let me tell you. The crowd was riled up by those who would themselves take power after the coup, and after rightfully elected councilmen had fled for their lives or been murdered. They were not riled up about real policy or real events. Popular outrage was nonstop in the 1890s. All the outrage was about racial mixing. This was the decade that Reconstruction comes to an end and Jim Crow sets upon the American stage. Plessy v. Ferguson happens in 1896. It's not an accident, right? It started with some random anger at a Black newspaper man. It was all the mob needed. Starting with Alexander Manly's newspaper office, the mob burned the building to the ground, assaulting, maiming, and murdering Black people along the way. After burning the newspaper, the mob turned their sights on the city government. It was, after all, an election. The election took place on November 8th, the coup, November 10th. The coup worked. The next day, the city had a new government, and the world never spoke of it again. Until they did. Well, that's not exactly true. The Klansman, better known as Birth of a Nation, was written as an homage to the celebrated event. Many a campaign was won based on victories claimed that day. Wilmington 1898 is the only recognized coup in American history. But I cannot believe it was the only one. Having bought into the notion that Black folks are always oppressed by the same old oppression in the same exact way, I had missed the Black excellence that characterizes Reconstruction. Black contributions to American culture are not only the Herculean task of doing physical labor. Black Southerners rebuilt the South after the Civil War. They held office. They rewrote the state constitutions that are still in place today, the same ones that wrote public education into the system. They constructed policy that became the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. We wrote that. It is astounding. It is an astounding oversight to suggest a straight line of Black oppression. And it got me thinking these weeks. Perhaps that is the ultimate victory of a coup. The violence is so oppressive, it overshadows the victories it seeks to overturn. Y'all, I must bear witness to what I witnessed. On January 6th, there was an attempted coup, and like all American coups, it was based on a call of white supremacy. Only count the legitimate votes. Throw out the votes in illegitimate places. Throw them out. Throw them out in Philadelphia. Throw them out in Atlanta. Throw them out in Milwaukee. Throw them out in Detroit. And let me tell you, if Washington, D.C. was a state, they'd have been screaming to throw them out there too. I remember when I first moved to Washington, D.C., go to grad school, University of Maryland. I was a 20-something Californian off to grad school, and I'd never seen anything like it. Chocolate City. It was glorious. Black culture abound and abide. Ben's Chili Bowl, U Street Corridor, go-go music. I digress. But as a Californian, one thing also sort of stood out to me. DC tourists were, well, interesting. They weren't like California tourists I knew so well. Growing up in San Jose, the tourists I knew came for the local flavor. Santa Cruz tourists want to see surfers. San Francisco tourists want to see hippies. But in DC, how do I want to say this? In DC, tourists come to see America. And for them, America's white. And watching him in the middle of Chocolate City, many of them seem to have the same question on their face. What are all these Black folks doing here? And why are they everywhere? From banker to bartender, cop to criminal. When I watched a group of overwhelmingly white Americans, many of them in Nazi and KKK paraphernalia, many more others choosing to march lockstep alongside them, and even more still cheering them as they took over the people's house, a minuscule drop in the bucket claiming legitimacy over the majority, I couldn't help but think that these people too, many of them DC first-timers, had also had this thought. And I wondered if seeing a city run by Black folks played a role in their activation to violence, especially those who had not planned to be part of a coup, but just got swept up in the Confederate flag wavingness of it all. I'm just kidding, I didn't wonder that. I absolutely knew it did. Joking, ha ha ha. I absolutely knew it did. And then I saw an article that jumped out at me as I was trying to think about what to say today. There's an article in BuzzFeed of all places. It was about the Black police officers that were on duty that day. And it blew me away. I mean, it talked about specifically the racism they endured during that coup attempt. And they said some really profound things about the way in which they were treated. About the things that were said to them. And in this article, you see these people break down by the end of this thing. I thought the ending of it was really profound, and I wanted to include it. It's a longer article. I'll share the link with you, but this reporter writes, at the end of the night, after the crowds had been dispersed and Congress got back to the business of certifying President-elect Joe Biden's victory, the veteran officer was overwhelmed with emotion and broke down in the rotunda. I sat down with one of my buddies, another Black guy, and tears just started streaming down my face. He said, "What the fuck, man? Is this America? What the fuck just happened? I'm so sick and tired of this shit." Soon he was screaming so that everyone in the rotunda, including his white colleagues, could hear what he had just gone through. "These are racist ass terrorists," he yelled out. In the 7 years since Black Lives Matter has become a rallying cry, the image of a white cop deciding how and when to enforce law and order has become ubiquitous. On Wednesday, Americans saw something different as Black officers tried to do the same, as they attempted to protect the very heart of American democracy. And instead of being honored by the supporters of a man who likes to call himself the law and order president, Black Capitol officers found themselves under attack. "I got called the N-word 15 times today." He didn't say N-word. The veteran officers shouted into the rotunda to no one in particular. "Trump did this, and we got all of these fucking people in our department that voted for him. How can you support him?" I cried for about 15 minutes. I just let it all out. It struck me, right? I have to be a witness to this day. I have to speak what I saw. And I think of James Baldwin, who said, "Black people need witness in this hostile world, which thinks everything is white." On June 6th, we watched an attempted coup. And like all attempted coups, it was based on challenging the simple premise that Black lives matter. Whenever I teach the history of lynching, there's only one lesson. Lynching is a strategy of white supremacy, terrorism. And if you look at a chart of lynching numbers, there are clear historical spikes from 1865 to the present. The spikes are clockwork. When I see them, I know. Where lynching spike happens, so did Black excellence. Lynchings happened to store owners whose businesses were outselling white competitors, activists who wouldn't shut up, and politicians who were rightfully elected. They are designed to change the political landscape with violence. They are often attended by politicians who feel cheated, or the up-and-comer with a gleam of harnessing the hatred into votes. Those I see campaigning on the back of January 6th join a time-honored American tradition, campaigning at the lynching. When I think about Wilmington, I always wonder, did they see it coming? If I had asked people at the time, just before it happened, if they had won their civil rights movement, would they have said yes? I know they would have. That's the thing. In this book it's a memoir by a guy named John Dancy, he ended up being president of the Urban League in Detroit after his family was driven from Wilmington during the riot. And he said something sort of interesting in this when he was talking about his hometown and how integrated it was and how much Black success there was and how there was no racial animosity. This is leading up to the only recognized coup in American history. And he said there were a number of prominent Negroes who never returned to town because the threats that had been made by the leaders of the riot. One was an attorney by the name of Armand Scott, who later was appointed by Franklin Roosevelt municipal judge in Washington, D.C. I used to tell him, Wilmington did you a favor by running you out of town. They ran you right into a judgeship. Lynching is a result of Black success. The people who fled were the people who were successful. Every revolution has a counter-revolution. On January 6th, we saw an attempted lynching. Lynching is a coup strategy. It is a tool of economic, political, and social control when you cannot compete in the fair democratic legislative arena. A lynching is a coup. We may only recognize Wilmington, but child please. Was I surprised on January 6th? Yes, I know. But I'm gonna validate my fear. It's a defense mechanism and it's strategically useful. Was I surprised on January 6th? Yes. I want to acknowledge it now, bear witness to what I saw and what I felt before the violence of it becomes so oppressive that it overshadows the victories it seeks to deny. Y'all, as Kamala Harris sits in the chair of the Vice President of the United States of America, the deciding vote in a tied Senate, can we just bask in the glory of Stacey Abrams? That's all I have for you guys today.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. All right. So thank you again for being here today in celebration of Black History Month. Thank you again to our incredible student performers, Edmond, McGinley, and Ashleigh Aston. If you can give another virtual round of applause to all of our presenters today. Thank you again. Thank you all. And have a great evening. We hope to see you in some of the upcoming events that we have. Again, I'm going to throw the link in the bottom of the chat. I hope to see you the rest of this month. Continue to celebrate Black history, not just in February, throughout the year, okay? Have a good evening.